The imperial physician's hands trembled as he stepped back from the diagnostic console. Princess Aelindra watched his face drain of color, a remarkable feat for a Velorian whose skin was already the pale blue of deep ocean ice. "Speak," she commanded, though her voice lacked its usual steel. 3 months of weakness had taught her that authority meant nothing when your own body betrayed you. "Your Highness, the cardiac degradation has accelerated beyond our projections." He couldn't meet her eyes. "The synthetic replacements have all been rejected. Velorian tissue donors. There are none compatible with your bloodline's unique markers." Aelindra had known this was coming. The Empress's bloodline carried gifts, telepathic sensitivity, extended lifespan, cellular regeneration. But those gifts came with a cost. Her heart, that stubborn organ that had beaten faithfully for 237 years, was failing in a way that Velorian medicine could not address. How long? Weeks, perhaps. A month if you remain in stasis between audiences. A month. She was to inherit an empire spanning 47 systems, broker peace with 3 hostile federations, and navigate a court that would devour any sign of weakness. And she had a month. The door to her private medical chamber slid open. Her aunt, High Counselor Thessaly, swept in with a particular urgency that meant politics had once again superseded protocol. "Forgive the intrusion, niece." Thessaly's silver eyes scanned the diagnostic readouts, and her expression hardened. "It's worse than you told the council. The council knows what they need to know. The council knows you're dying. Half of them are already positioning their candidates for succession. Lord Varantis has suggested, quite publicly, that perhaps it's time for a regency." Aelindra's laugh was bitter enough to taste. A regency. How convenient for him. "There is not another option." Thessaly's voice dropped, though they were alone except for the physician, who knew better than to have ears. "The xenobiologists have been running compatibility studies." Discreetly. Compatibility with what? Human psych. The word hung in the air like a blade. Aelindra stared at her aunt, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. "You cannot be serious. The alien princess needed a heart transplant. Only human hearts were compatible." Thessaly delivered the words flatly, clinically. "That's not poetry, niece. That's the medical report I received this morning. Human cardiac tissue shares enough baseline similarities with our own that, with proper genetic modification, a transplant could succeed. Their hearts are remarkably adaptable organs. Resilient. Self-repairing in ways ours are not. You're asking me to put a human heart in my chest." Aelindra pressed her palm against her sternum, feeling the irregular flutter beneath. "A primitive species we've barely acknowledged as sentient for 3 generations. I'm asking you to live." Thessaly's composure cracked just slightly, just enough to show the fear beneath. "I'm asking you to rule. Because if you die, Aelindra, this empire falls to those who would burn it for warmth." The princess turned away, facing the window that looked out over the capital city. Spires of crystalline architecture rose toward the violet sky, beautiful and cold. Like everything about her life. Even if I agreed, what human would consent to this? We're not speaking of blood donation. We're speaking of a heart. There is a program. Terran volunteers for experimental medical exchange. Most seek compensation for their families, or citizenship rights in the outer colonies. Thessaly paused. "One has already been identified as a potential match. He's being brought to the station. You've already arranged this. I've arranged options. The choice remains yours." Aelindra closed her eyes. She could feel her heart laboring, each beat a small war against entropy. She thought of Lord Varantis on her throne, of the treaties she'd spent decades building torn apart, of her mother's legacy reduced to a footnote. "Bring him to me," she said. "I would meet this human who might carry my life in his chest." Marcus Cole had been expecting a laboratory. Sterile white walls, examination tables, the cold efficiency of medical processing. He'd signed enough waivers to paper a small apartment, submitted to tests that probed every cell of his body, and resigned himself to being a specimen. He had not expected a throne room. The chamber stretched before him like a cathedral carved from ice and starlight. Crystalline pillars rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow, and at the far end, elevated on a dais of pale stone, sat a woman who was very clearly not human. She was tall, taller than him by several inches, with skin the color of moonlight and hair that fell past her shoulders in waves of deep silver. Her features were angular, elegant, alien in a way that his brain kept trying to reconcile with human beauty standards, and failing. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were silver too, like liquid mercury, and they watched him approach with an intensity that made him feel like an equation being solved. 2 guards flanked him. They hadn't touched him, but their presence made it clear that his path was not negotiable. He stopped at the base of the dais. No one had told him the protocol for this. Did he bow? Kneel? In the 3 days since he'd been transported from Earth, no one had explained much of anything. You are Marcus Cole. Her voice was cool, precise, each word chosen with care. The human who volunteered for organ donation. Yes. He hesitated, then added, Your Highness. Ma'am, I'm not sure if the correct Highness is adequate. She studied him with those unsettling eyes. You are smaller than I expected. Marcus almost laughed. He was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered from years of construction work, before the accident that had ended that career. On Earth, no one had ever called him small. We're a compact species, I guess. Why are you here? The question seemed to have layers he couldn't see. He answered the surface one. The compensation package. It's enough to pay off my mother's medical debt and set up my sister for college. That's... He stopped, uncertain how much this alien princess cared about human economics. That's a lot, where I come from. So you would die for money. I would die for my family. The correction came out sharper than he intended. The money's just how it works in practice. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. And you understand what is being asked. Your heart would be removed. You would be ended. That's what they told me, yeah. They told you. She leaned forward slightly. But you do not believe them. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The briefing had mentioned that Velorians had some telepathic ability, empathic sensitivity they'd called it. But standing under her gaze, he wasn't so sure. I believe I signed up for something, he said carefully. I believe I'm going to help someone. Beyond that, I figure I'll find out when it happens. Princess Aelindra rose from her throne. She was wearing something that might have been a gown or might have been armor. The Velorian aesthetic made it hard to tell, and as she descended the steps, Marcus realized that she moved wrong. Her steps were too careful, her breathing too controlled. She was in pain. You were not afraid, she observed, stopping an arm's length away. I'm terrified, he admitted. But I made my choice. Being scared doesn't change that. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then she turned to one of the guards. He will be given quarters in the residential wing, not the medical bay. Her voice carried an edge that suggested this was an argument she'd had before. If this man is to give his life for mine, he will spend his remaining days in comfort, not confinement. Marcus blinked. Remaining days? The procedure requires preparation. Genetic modification of the donor tissue to prevent rejection. It cannot be rushed. She met his eyes again, and this time, there was something almost human in her expression. You have 3 weeks, Marcus Cole. I suggest you not spend them in a cell. She swept past him, her guard falling into step behind her, and Marcus was left standing in the throne room of an alien empire, wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into. The quarters they gave him were larger than his entire apartment back in Detroit. The bed was too soft, shaped for a body longer than his, and the window looked out on an alien cityscape that made his head hurt if he stared at it too long. But the door wasn't locked, and when he'd asked if he could walk around, the answer had been a surprised yes. So Marcus walked. The station, he learned it was called the Aethon Citadel, was part palace, part administrative center, and part something he couldn't quite classify. The architecture made no sense to human eyes, all sweeping curves and impossible angles. But after a few days, he started to find a rhythm in it. The Velorians moved through their spaces like water through channels, and if he watched long enough, he could follow the current. Most of them ignored him. A few stared openly, their silver eyes tracking him with expressions he couldn't read. 1 or 2 made gestures he suspected were rude, but no one stopped him. On the 5th day, he found the garden. It wasn't really a garden, not by Earth standards. There were no flowers, no grass, no trees, but there were structures of living crystal that grew in patterns that might have been natural, or might have been cultivated. And there were shallow pools of water that reflected the violet sky, and there were benches carved from something that looked like stone but felt warm under his hands. It was beautiful, and it was empty, or so he thought, until he rounded a crystal formation and found Princess Aelindra sitting on one of the benches. Her eyes closed, her face turned towards something he couldn't see. Marcus started to back away. He'd been told in indirect terms that the princess valued her privacy, that she did not seek company, that her illness had made her even more withdrawn than usual. He should leave. But her eyes opened before he could move. Human.I. She said it like a classification, not an insult. You found the contemplation garden. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. You did not. This is a public space. She gestured to the bench across from her. Sit if you wish. Marcus hesitated, then sat. Up close, he could see the signs of her illness more clearly. The faint blue veins visible beneath her pale skin. The slight tremor in her hands. The way she held herself still, conserving energy. "Do you come here often?" he asked, then winced at how absurd the question sounded. "I used to. Before." She stopped, and he saw her jaw tighten. "Before it became difficult to walk this far. It's peaceful. Yes." She studied him with that unsettling intensity. "You are not what I expected, Marcus Cole. What did you expect? I am not certain." "Something more. Primitive, perhaps. Our records of humanity are not extensive. We have observed your species for only a few centuries, and you were not considered significant until recently. We get that a lot." Marcus smiled slightly. "The not significant part, I mean. Does it not offend you? Should it?" He shrugged. "I'm one person. I've never been significant. I was a construction worker before my back gave out, and after that, I was unemployed. Significance is pretty far down my list of concerns." She tilted her head, a gesture that was almost bird-like. "Your back. You are injured? Old injury. Herniated disc. It healed wrong, and I can't do heavy lifting anymore." He gestured at the alien landscape around them. "Turns out that doesn't matter much when you're donating organs to alien princesses. You speak of your death very casually. I've had time to make peace with it." That wasn't entirely true, but it was true enough. "My mom's going to be okay. My sister's going to have a future. That's more than I had to offer them when I was alive." Aelindra was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Softer. "On Veloria, we do not discuss such things. Death is considered a private matter. A failure of the body, not to be spoken of in polite company. That sounds lonely." "It is." She seemed surprised by her own admission. "It is very lonely." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. So he said nothing, and they sat together in the alien garden, two dying people watching the light change on the crystal spires. The second week she sent for him. He'd been expecting medical tests. There had been plenty of those, administered by physicians who treated him with the careful distance reserved for specimens. But instead, the summons led him to a private chamber, smaller than the throne room, furnished with what he was learning to recognize as Velorian comfort. Low couches, warm light, a table set with food he couldn't identify. Aelindra was waiting for him, dressed in simpler clothes than he'd seen before. Without the formal regalia, she looked younger, more fragile. "I wish to speak with you," she said, gesturing for him to sit. Without the formality of court, Marcus sat, eyeing the food uncertainly. "Should I be worried that I will poison you?" Her lips curved, just slightly. It was the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her. That would be counterproductive. He laughed, despite himself. "Fair point. The physicians tell me the genetic modification is proceeding well. Your tissue is remarkably adaptable. They seem almost offended by how cooperative your biology is being. Sorry to disappoint them." "You misunderstand." "They're not disappointed. They are confused. Humans were supposed to be simple, primitive. Your cellular structure should not be able to integrate with ours as readily as it does." She paused. "One of them called it elegant. My heart? Your entire species." She picked up something from the table, a fruit maybe, though it was the wrong color for any fruit he knew, and turned it in her fingers. "We have studied many worlds, many forms of life. Most are specialized, adapted perfectly to their environment, and only to their environment. Humans are different. You adapt to everything. Survive anything. Your bodies are not strong, but they are flexible." "I think that's a compliment." "It is an observation." She set the fruit down without eating it. "I've been trying to understand why a human would volunteer for this. The compensation explains the motivation, but not the willingness. Your kind values survival. It is one of your defining traits. Sometimes there are things more important than survival." "Such as?" Marcus thought about his mother's face when he'd told her about the program. The way she'd cried. The way she'd begged him not to go. And then the way she'd held him, at the end, and said she was proud of him. "Family," he said. "Duty. Keeping your word. Doing what needs to be done even when it costs you everything." Aelindra's silver eyes were very bright. "These are not concepts I would have associated with humanity. Then you haven't been paying attention." For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Then she looked away, and the moment was gone. "Eat," she said, gesturing at the table. "The physicians want you well nourished, and I..." She hesitated. "I would like to hear more about Earth." About your life there. So Marcus ate strange alien food and told stories about Detroit, about construction sites and union meetings, and the bar where he used to watch football with his friends. About his mother's cooking and his sister's dreams of becoming a teacher. About small, ordinary human things that seemed to fascinate her more than he would have expected. And when the evening ended and he returned to his quarters, he realized that he hadn't thought about dying once. The third week, everything changed. Marcus was in the medical bay for his daily tests when the alarm started. Not the harsh blare of an emergency. Something different, a pattern of tones that sent the medical staff running. "What's happening?" he asked, but no one answered. They were already gone. He found his way to the garden. It had become his refuge, the one place on the station that felt almost peaceful, and waited. Hours passed. The sky through the crystalline ceiling shifted from violet to deep purple to black. Finally, Thessaly found him. The High Counselor looked older than he remembered. The silver of her hair seemed duller, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She collapsed, Thessaly said without preamble. Her heart, the degradation accelerated faster than we anticipated. She's in stasis now, but what? The procedure must happen sooner. Tomorrow. Tonight, if we can prepare in time. Thessaly's voice was steady, but her hands were not. Do you understand what that means? Marcus understood. He'd known it was coming. He'd made his peace with it, or thought he had. But standing in the alien garden, under an alien sky, he realized that peace was not the same as acceptance. Can I see her? Thessaly hesitated. That is not customary. I'm giving her my heart. I think custom can make an exception. For a long moment, the High Counselor simply looked at him. Then she nodded, once, and led him to the medical wing. Aelindra lay in a chamber of pale light, surrounded by machines that hummed with frequencies he couldn't hear. She looked small, fragile, human almost in her vulnerability. She's conscious, Thessaly said quietly, but weak. Do not tire her. Marcus approached the bed. Aelindra's eyes were open, watching him, and even now, even dying, they held that fierce intelligence that had startled him in the throne room. Marcus Cole. Her voice was barely a whisper. You should not be here. Neither should you. He sat in the chair beside her bed, close enough to touch, though he didn't. You're supposed to be running an empire. The empire can wait. A ghost of that almost smile. It has waited this long. They said the surgery has to happen soon. Yes. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. For what? For this. For asking you to... She stopped, and he saw her jaw tighten, fighting for control. I have been thinking about what you said, about duty, about keeping your word. And I have been a poor host. Her eyes opened again, and there was something in them he hadn't seen before. Something raw. You came here to die, and I have spent these weeks treating you as a curiosity. A specimen. I did not. Her voice broke. She turned her face away. Marcus reached out, then hesitated. The Velorians were not a tactile people. Touch carried meaning here that he didn't fully understand. But she was crying, silver tears, because of course even their tears were different, and he couldn't just sit there. He took her hand. She flinched, then went very still. Her fingers were cold, almost fragile, and he could feel her pulse, weak, irregular, struggling. You spent these weeks talking to me, he said quietly. Learning about my world. Letting me learn about yours. That's not treating someone as a specimen. That's treating them as a person. I did not want to. The words came out broken, almost angry. I did not want to know you. Easier when you were just a human. Just a heart. Now you are. Now I'm what? She looked at him then, and her silver eyes were full of something that might have been grief. Now you are Marcus. And I do not want you to die. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt his own chest tighten, not with fear, but with something else. Something he hadn't expected to feel here at the end of everything. Then let me choose, he said. Let me give you this. Not because you demanded it, or because I was paid for it, but because I want you to live. Because these 3 weeks have been... He stopped, searching for words. I came here expecting to be a transaction, a commodity. And instead, I got to know someone extraordinary. Someone who's going to change the galaxy if she gets the chance. Marcus, I'm not finished. He squeezed her hand gently. Where I come from, we have this saying. Greater love has no one than this. To lay down one's life for one's friends. I didn't understand that before. I thought I was doing this for money, for my family. And I was. But I'm also doing it for you. Because you matter. Because you deserve to live. Aelindra's tears fell freely now, silver tracks on pale cheeks. She lifted her other hand, trembling, weak, and pressed it against his. I do not have words, she whispered. In my language, there are no words for what you are giving me. Then don't say anything. He managed to smile, though it cost him. Just live. Be the ruler your people need. Change the galaxy. And maybe sometimes remember the human who believed in you. She pulled his hand toward her, pressed it against her chest where her failing heart still struggled. I will carry you with me, she said, always. In every beat. They came for him at dawn. The procedure room was cold and bright, full of machines he couldn't comprehend. Thessaly was there, and the physicians, and a handful of others whose roles he didn't know. Aelindra was not there. They'd told him she couldn't be, that she needed to remain in stasis until the transplant. But as he lay down on the table and felt the first touch of the sedatives entering his system, he thought he heard her voice. Live well, Marcus Cole. Live in me. And then there was nothing but light. She woke to pain. Not the familiar ache of her failing heart, but something different. Something fierce and vital and alive. Aelindra opened her eyes. The medical chamber was quiet. Thessaly sat in the chair beside her bed, silver hair loose around her shoulders. And died. Thessaly's head snapped up. For a moment, her composure cracked entirely, and Aelindra saw tears on her cheeks. You're awake. Thessaly reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. The surgery was successful. The heart, his heart, it's strong. Stronger than we anticipated. Aelindra pressed her free hand to her chest. She could feel it now. That fierce rhythm. So different from the faltering pulse she'd known for months. It beat like a drum. Like a march. Like something that refused to be silenced. Marcus, she said. Where is Shaw? Thessaly's expression told her everything. The body has been preserved according to Terran customs, her aunt said quietly. We were not certain what you would want to do. Aelindra closed her eyes. The grief hit her like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. She had known this was coming. She had accepted it, or thought she had. But feeling his heart beat in her chest, knowing that he had given her this, that he had died so she could live. Leave me, she said. Please. Thessaly hesitated, then nodded, and withdrew. Alone, Aelindra let herself weep. 3 days later, she walked into the council chamber. The nobles were not expecting her. She could see it in their faces. The shock and calculation, the rapid reassessment of political positions. Lord Varantis, who had been speaking from her throne, went pale. Your Highness. He recovered quickly, sliding off the elevated seat with practiced grace. We were not informed you had recovered, clearly. Aelindra climbed the steps to the dais. Her body was still weak, still healing, but the heart in her chest beat strong and steady. It carried her forward. The council will resume under my direction. I trust there are no objections? There are no objections. There never were, when she used that tone. She settled into her throne. It had never felt entirely comfortable before, but something had changed now, something in the way she held herself, and looked out at the assembled nobles. There is a matter we must address, she said. The human who gave his life for mine, Marcus Cole. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of these nobles had not even known her illness was real, let alone that a human had been involved in her recovery. It is not customary, Aelindra continued, to honor those of lesser species. Our protocols do not have provisions for recognizing their sacrifices. This is a failing. One I intend to correct. Your Highness, Varantis interjected smoothly, surely this is a minor matter. The human was compensated. His family will receive what was promised. And more. Aelindra's voice cut through his objection like a blade, but compensation is not honor. Marcus Cole did not die for money. He died because he believed his life had value when it was given for another. He died demonstrating a courage and selflessness that puts many in this chamber to shame. The silence was absolute. I am implementing a new protocol. Henceforth, any being who sacrifices their life in service to the crown will be recognized with full honors, regardless of species. Their names will be recorded in the Hall of Valor. Their families will be granted protected status. And in the case of Marcus Cole, she paused, feeling the heart in her chest. His heart, beating for her. In the case of Marcus Cole, there will be a memorial, here, in the capital, where all may see it and remember that humanity's worth is not measured by their technology or their territory, but by the size of their hearts. The memorial was unveiled at sunset. It was not large. Aelindra had wanted something modest, something Marcus himself might have approved of, but it was beautiful. A crystalline structure that caught the light, with a simple inscription in both Velorian and English. Marcus Cole, who gave his heart so another might live humanity's finest Aelindra, stood before it for a long time after the ceremony ended. The nobles had gone, the officials had departed, and even Thessaly had withdrawn to give her privacy. She pressed her hand to her chest. "I do not know if you can hear me," she said quietly. "The physicians say there is no consciousness transfer, no echo of you in this heart. They say it is simply tissue, nothing more. The heart beats steady and strong. But I choose to believe otherwise. I choose to believe that some part of you remains. That when I feel courage I did not have before, or compassion I did not know I possessed, it is you. Your gift. Your legacy." A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of something almost familiar, almost like earth. "I have opened negotiations with the Terran government," she continued. "Formal recognition. Trade agreements. Cultural exchange. There is resistance, of course. Many still see humanity as primitive, insignificant. But they have never had a human heart beating in their chest. They do not know what I know." She smiled, and it felt strange on her face. She had not smiled much before, but Marcus had smiled constantly, even at the end, and she found herself wanting to carry that forward too. "You told me to change the galaxy. I intend to. And when I do, when humanity takes its place among the stars as equals, I will make certain they know it began with you. With a construction worker from Detroit who believed his life had value when it was given for someone else." She touched the memorial one last time. "Thank you, Marcus. For everything." Then she turned and walked back toward the citadel, toward her throne, toward an empire that was waiting for her to lead it. Behind her, the sunset painted the crystal spires in shades of gold and rose, and somewhere in the distance, she could have sworn she heard music. Human music. A song about heart and courage and never giving up. The heart in her chest beat on. 6 months later, the first human ambassador arrived at the Aethon Citadel. He was a young man, nervous and eager, sent by a Terran government still uncertain of its place in galactic order. Aelindra received him in her throne room, surrounded by the full pageantry of the Velorian court. But after the formal reception, she led him to the garden, to the memorial. "I wanted you to see this," she said. "Before the negotiations begin, before we discuss treaties and trade routes and territorial boundaries." The ambassador stood before the crystal structure, reading the inscription with wide eyes. "Marcus Cole," he said. "I remember when he volunteered. They said he was just doing it for the money. He was, at first." Aelindra touched her chest, a gesture that had become habitual. "But he became so much more. He taught me that humanity's greatest strength is not your technology or your ambition. It is your capacity for love, for sacrifice, for believing in something larger than yourselves." The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "We'll try to live up to that, to him. I know you will." Aelindra offered her hand, a human gesture, one she had learned from Marcus. "And I will be here, with his heart beating in my chest, to remind you." The ambassador shook her hand. And in that simple gesture, two species took their first step towards something neither had imagined. Partnership. Understanding. Love. 50 years later, when Empress Aelindra was very old by human standards but still young by Velorian ones, she stood before the memorial for the last time. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had risen, taken their place among the stars, become one of the most influential species in the known universe. Some said it was their adaptability, their resilience, their stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Aelindra knew better. It was their hearts. "I never forgot," she said to the memorial, her voice steady despite the weight of years. "Not one day, not one beat." She pressed her hand to her chest. The heart, his heart, still beat strong. The physicians called it a miracle. They said human hearts were not supposed to last this long, were not supposed to adapt so perfectly to an alien body. Aelindra called it something else. She called it love. And as she walked away from the memorial for the last time, ready to pass her throne to the next generation, she carried Marcus Cole with her. In her chest, in her memory, in every beat of the heart that had changed the galaxy. The end.